So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining for this Inception meeting today. My name is Manu Gupta, and I'm a co-founder of Seeds, which is a very active member organization of ADRRN. I would like to really welcome you for this very unique project, which I'm sure it'll get more and more interesting as it progresses. Today in the room, we have Alex Odlum from the Humanitarian Encyclopedia project based out of Geneva. We'll hear more from him slightly later. We have Steve Glowinski and Nupur from who are co-founders of Peer Connect. This is an organization that builds communities around common interests. We have in the room members of the executive committee of ADRRN. Meghna is there. All of them are familiar faces. Meghna, Hanan, and Samira from the Exco. So welcome. And most important, we have members of ADRRN who have signed up to be part of this journey, to be co-travelers of this journey. Thank you very much for taking out this time. I know all of you are practitioners, very busy souls. So, but I can promise you that this will be a time very well spent today and then a few hours over the next few months until we culminate in our annual general meeting in Bangkok in December. So just to give you a very, very broad sense, I'm not the expert here. The speakers after me will speak to you in more detail, but just because we are brothers and sisters here, I can take this liberty to, explain it in my own understanding here. So, we are all practitioners, right? And we have been working in the field and implementing projects that we get funded by from international donors. And then, we've learned the humanitarian language, so to say, by reading these reports, by seeing what we are, how do we relate to them. And we have tried to interpret the same words to our local communities, right? I mean, depending on which culture we are in, which religion, which language we are speaking, we try to interpret it in our own way. And that's where we have struggled, isn't it? Sometimes a word in English does not have an equivalent in our own local language, right? And then we make some kind of we cook some kind of terminology to explain that English word. And I know we've, simple words like vulnerability, something that we have used so often, does not have an equivalent in my own language, in Hindi, So what I try explaining them is something nearby, something near vulnerability. So like something around fear, which is not really vulnerability, Fear is a mental state and very different from vulnerability. But that's how it is, So here's your chance to reverse that trend. Okay, this is what makes this whole project so very engaging. By participating in this project, you can tell the world that how we need to enrich this whole concepts, So we've taken 3 concepts, which we'll talk about later, but how we can co-produce these words, these terminologies that we use in our humanitarian projects, by giving our interpretations, which we represent from the communities that we are working for. Yeah. And so they should also become part of the definition in some way. So we are now going to, by being part of this working group, we will now start building around these basic concepts, bringing our own local cultural nuances, right? So isn't that exciting, to really, for the first time, perhaps we are getting this chance to reverse flow, this whole definition of concepts. So that's how we are here, and we, of course, it's going to be interesting with all the experts coming in, helping us sort of chew on some words, maybe reinterpret them. We will have some debates around words and concepts, and for this, the Peer Connect, Steve and Nupur will be kind of moderating that discussion through email and other means, which they will tell you in a bit. But that's what it is about here. And I'm sure we will find it very, very exciting. So the members of the working group, just for Steve and Alex and Nupur to know, are, as we have right now, we have 14 organizations who have signed up to be part of this working group, and 29 organizations. We have about, I think, 9 of us today. So not such a great attendance to start with, but these are things that we can develop as an, I think we should, in any case, create a group around this. And I'm sure they will pick up interest as they go along. Also, because maybe they are busy today. But we'll keep this group of, of fellow travelers and part of the working group. So please participate in whatever way. We get sometimes intimidated by foreign language and our English not being our native language, but this is your chance. This is your chance to challenge, debate, propose how we can enrich some of these very common concepts in the humanitarian world. Yeah. So with that, let me stop here and hand over back to Meghna. Would you like to take this forward? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Manu, for that introduction and walking us through on what this whole project is going to hold through. Now we have with us Alex, who'll be walking us through on the whole Humanitarian Encyclopedia project, on how it evolved. And over to you, Alex.
Hi, thank you so much, and good morning, good afternoon to you all. Thanks for that, wonderful opening remarks from Manu, giving his understanding and view and enthusiasm on this project. That's really nice to see. And I think it's a great summary in just a few words of what this project is really fundamentally trying to achieve. So that's really nice. And thanks for the handover, Meghna, and the organization. So lovely to see you all. And today, I think you can see my slides now. So I'll just make them a bit bigger. Sorry, no, what? Sorry, too many screens happening here. I'm just gonna. I think you can. Is it big enough? Fine to see, right?
Yeah, you could put it on slideshow if you want.
I know I've got three screens here, and I'm struggling to change
okay. But this is good enough.
I think it's okay. So yeah, so I just wanted to explain in a bit more detail the Humanitarian Encyclopedia project, what it is, and I think why it's important, especially in terms of trying to foster a shared understanding of some of these words and terminology and concepts, and yeah, and then to explain a little bit the background to this project and this work in the Asia region, and where we're hoping to move forward. Yeah, as a broader community. So just to start with, what is the Humanitarian Encyclopedia? So it's an online platform, essentially, where you can learn and share about knowledge and concepts related to the humanitarian sector. And so we've built this platform to try and make the tool as collaborative as possible. So it's a place where you can go to passively, read and learn about some of these words and how they've been used in the humanitarian sector, but to also bring your own perspective and your own definitions and interpretations onto the platform, and then we have methods to try and integrate all of that knowledge so that we can understand the concepts in a shared way. So there's many things you can do on the platform, learn about the project, you can read about the concepts, there's sort of expertise notes, sharing expertise and experience about the concepts in theory and in practice. And then there's resources, so a lot of documents about all these different concepts, guidance notes, how to implement them, as well as experiences and cases from the field. And then finally, there's some databases which create a sort of repository of the humanitarian organizations that populate this sector, and an opportunity to study them or to add your organization and sort of become part of the community. And then finally, there's a forum feature which is about discussing and debating the concepts. And essentially what this activity process that we're doing the inception of now is trying to replicate that idea where these concepts have many meanings and understandings, and we can discuss them and generate useful sort of shared knowledge about the concepts. So that's the platform. And basically our vision with this project has been to develop a shared understanding. So not necessarily that we all agree, but that we share the understanding such that I might mean something different to what you mean by the word localization. But if we both recognize that we have different understandings, then we can move forward together and improve the way we collaborate, coordinate, and try and respond in a humanitarian situation. And so to do this process, we've collected a lot of data, we've had a lot of, analyzed a lot of documents, we've done a big survey, we've conducted workshops across the world in different regions and different humanitarian hubs, and we sort of engaged expert opinions from different backgrounds. And essentially this process allowed us to map the concepts of interest to the global humanitarian community. And there's a big list, it's 129 long, but you have everything from leave no one behind, to localization, to humanity, to impact. So there's many different concepts in the list. And what we've done for many of them is to try and just provide a short summary that describes the concept, but then elaborate on that to try and explain, okay, there's different definitions by different organizations, there's different nuances and complexities to the concepts, and we try and bring this together into a web page where you can learn about it, characterize the humanitarian sector. And so there's a database of over 2,500 organizations. So it's not comprehensive, and you may go there and find your organization's missing. So it'd be great if you feel like adding your organization. It can be good for visibility. It can be good for understanding the other organizations around the world that are doing similar activities. And so you can just see a snapshot there of the types of organizations. There's everything from private sector organizations to specific projects, to network organizations, to NGOs, UN agencies. So there's a whole range of organizations. Next slide, please. There's similarly a library where you have lots of different documents from different organizations. So some of these are sort of policy documents, others are guidance documents on different ways to, for example, implement a community-based approach or a faith-sensitive approach. So these are predominantly written more by international organizations, but ideally we build up a library of documents from all types of organizations to get to represent that diversity. Next slide. And then finally, we've sort of collected or developed a methodology for taking all this, because there's a lot of textual data and that's time consuming to analyze in general. So we work with a technical group of researchers who use linguistic methods and analyze lexical data to try and make sense out of all the information that comes onto the platform and turn it into a more interpretable format. And so you can see a little bit an example of how we take all of this language data and try to make infographics and presentations that tell us a little bit about the concept based on the data and the inputs from the field. So this is an example of accountability. You can look at the red dot at the center. And in the blue, you see that it's closely related to things like transparency, quality, governance, participation. So you start to understand that, you know, some of these buzzwords and terms that you see all the time in the humanitarian language, that they're closely connected to each other, and we can cluster them and understand their sort of broader meaning. And then in the yellow, there's some of these different types of accountability that we always talk about. So you have accountability to affected people, so the people that humanitarian organizations serve. But then you have also another type of accountability, like financial accountability to the donors or those who provide the funding. So we start to see that accountability is a very complex concept. And then you can see the different ways it's used in the sector as well. So we talk always about accountability mechanisms or accountability systems. And so there's sort of all these terms showing that accountability is something that humanitarian organizations, you know, they do activities to try and achieve it. So through this type of analysis, we learn a little bit about the concept. Next one. And so I can recognize that for many, such a graph is quite busy. There's a lot happening. Also in text, you know, they can be quite long and time consuming to read, or you know, it's not everyone's favorite means of communication. So we've also tried to, you know, make the findings more accessible by creating little videos that last for 1 or 2 minutes and simply explain, you know, something like what is data or what is accountability. Next one, thanks. Yeah. And then to go further, and this is more for the research side of the community, but we also try and make all that data available for others to come along and do their own analysis. So here's an example of a tool we created where you can compare different concepts and their usage over time against each other. So you can see like localization is a very new concept. Prior to 2016, it really wasn't talked about in the humanitarian sector. Whereas participation is something, you know, it's a word that's been frequently used for a longer time period, even though their meanings are somewhat similar. Next one, thanks. And so on this online platform, as a humanitarian practitioner or as a researcher or as another member of the community, there's many sort of specific activities you can do. So one is to sort of, you know, work collaboratively. So, you know, this is a group of practitioners from the Asia region. So you're working collaboratively through this project that we're launching at the moment. But you may at one point, you know, think to work collaboratively with practitioners from another language region, Spanish speaking or French speaking, or other sort of English speaking practitioners from different regions to try and, you know, understand better what the concepts mean. You can have that also on an online forum, discussion and debate, or you can, yeah, sort of interact in different ways on the forum. You could add your organization to the database, or you could find other organizations in your area of activity. You could contribute to research in different ways, but I think a popular way we've identified with some local humanitarian organizations is to share case studies. So this was an example we did with Abba, which is a local organization working in Colombia. And they were very interested in this idea of who is a civilian. And so they shared some case studies where that becomes actually quite a difficult question. For example, when civilians are engaging in protests against the government, and it gets so violent that it's bordering on a conflict, at what stage are they still, defined as civilians? And that has important implications for humanitarian actors. And then you can simply, participate in workshops and learning exercises. And we've also developed an online course that you can take to learn how to do research in difficult humanitarian settings. So there's some of these just more traditional learning resources that we make available through the platform. And then finally, there's a format to share expertise or experience in a more traditional report. So here's an example of a course director who shared their sort of knowledge about what protection means and how is it the same but also different from something like protection of civilians. So that's the broad overview of the Humanitarian Encyclopedia platform. And yeah, just wanted to go a little bit more onto what we really mean by shared understanding and why we think that could be helpful. So from our experience talking with humanitarian practitioners, there is a demand and a desire to have a shared understanding of concepts. And yet in practice, we often mean different things by the same words. So even a concept as fundamental as humanity has multiple definitions, and different organizations, write down different definitions and they believe in different definitions. And you can see that spread is often, 30% agree with one definition and 30% agree with another definition. So there's quite a lot of diversity in terms of what people understand by humanity. And so there's usually two ways that we look to resolve this in practice. So one is very good and very important contribution, and that's to create a glossary. So we ask for, can we just have a simple single definition where we can come and learn, what is it, humanity? That's all we need. And then we can apply that in our programs and our reports. And so that's one way to sort of resolve this issue. And so Relief Web has a really nice glossary of all the key humanitarian terms, and there's a few other sort of dictionaries in this sense. But then the problem is that, there's not a problem, but then another way to look at it is, well, we're always going to have different definitions emerge in different contexts. And so it's important to have a space where we can easily access and understand that there's multiple definitions and multiple understandings. And once we recognize that, then we can have a shared understanding. And so, yeah, and then another aspect is that in different contexts and different localities, humanitarian practitioners differ about which concepts are the most important ones. So I think we already polled your organizations about which concepts you find most interesting and important. And the list is not necessarily going to be the same as if we ask the same question to people in Latin America or the Middle East. So there's a variation in terms of what humanitarians think are really the important or interesting concepts. And so our sort of approach there is to try and be dynamic. So this is also changing over time and changing between region. So again, I just use this example of localization because it's really vivid that if we asked you what was the most important concept 10 years ago, nobody would have said localization. And now everybody says that localization is very important. So you can see that the importance changes over time. And then the final section, just a few more slides on where we're going with this encyclopedia platform and how we can see you guys really helping and participate and take ownership actually of this community and platform. And so, yeah, going back, we did a lot of research to map the humanitarian sector. And then in 2021, we launched this online platform that I've presented to you to try and share all of that research and knowledge and create a dynamic, interactive online forum. And now the goal is to build a governance model through some kind of consortium mechanism where practitioners can really take the lead in driving forward the growth and dynamism in the platform. So by using the tools, adapting them to better meet, what do you need on a daily or weekly or monthly basis to know actually about, the words and terminology and concepts. And so I think the key to that is forming a community of the different types of people involved in humanitarian action around the world. And so you have local humanitarian practitioners as well as the international humanitarian practitioners. But then there's also researchers like myself and also many researchers at different levels of the system. But then there's also people who come just to simply learn what are these words that humanitarians are using, and that might be private sector actors who are seeing a way to engage in humanitarian work, journalists, development actors or human rights actors who work on similar topics but from a different perspective, and affected populations as well. So people who are participating in or receiving humanitarian aid. I think we all want to better empower the affected population, but it's important that they have a resource or a way to understand some of the language and terminology that the international actors are using. And so in the community, you can have learners or contributors or leaders. So we need all of those types of roles to make the community flourish. And so the steps for that is simply to try and establish the right sort of governance model that can grow this community, and then build the local networks through the sorts of activities that we're going to be doing with your network, so that we know each other, so that we can easily communicate and share our perspectives and examples of what the concepts mean in practice. And then, find ways to sustain the knowledge, to grow the community, to get more perspectives, and also on a financial level, work out, what's the way to keep an online community, which has some costs, but at the same time, create a sort of, like a way to generate donor funding or income to improve the features that make it more usable and useful for practice. So that's sort of where this pilot project with the ADRRN in Asia region comes in, is to test how this could look just in one region, and then those lessons will be useful for other regions around the world. So I think that was my final point. And thanks for your patient listening and patience with the technical difficulty.
Thank you, Alex, for that wonderful outline towards what this consortium project is all about. We move to Steve for walking us through how this whole project will be rolled out, and we take question answers towards the end. So if you have any queries on how we are rolling, we'll be taking that towards the end of the portion. Steve, over to you. Do you want me to share the presentation as well?
Yeah, the first slide.
Sure.
I can talk to that. So I'm Steve Glavinsky. I'm located in New York. Long experience in development, including all the countries listed on the list of participants here. I've done work in all of them. And this is a special area that, as Meghna mentioned, or Manu mentioned, bringing communities, building communities. And as you saw from Alex's slide, this is what the intention is here. We're going to see if we can get a community around agreeing on a common understanding of these concepts globally. This is the what I'll do is working on this part, explaining what this project is and your role in it, and where we go, and then I'll hand it over to Newport to talk about the next step, which is an initial discussion on some of the terms. So Alex, as you noticed, spent many years in his organization coming up with this encyclopedia, and there's a tremendous amount of material that went into it. He didn't mention how many documents that were scanned. I forgot how many, but there were thousands of them to come up with this list of indicators, 129 terms altogether. And so they've done a lot of work, and the intention was to build this to demonstrate that it can be done, and then to hand it off to, he calls it a consortium, but the consortium is the users. So in other words, the value of this is going to be maintained by the users if the users think then it's valuable. And I think that's the idea here, to transfer the ownership of this to the actual people that are involved. And as Manu said, the real people that are involved are the ones like you, the humanitarian organizations working in the field, not so much the researchers, although they have a lot to do to track and to understand the concepts and to help bring kind of consistency across all concepts. But if you could picture if all of the humanitarian organizations globally, everybody on that list, had a common understanding of all the terms, it would tremendously improve the impact of everybody would be on the same page, and you could track it more effectively, and you can see which ones are where the effectiveness is. If you interpret it, if you come up with a common understanding, you can measure it, and you can compare regions and organizations in terms of how effective they are. And so I think it's very important, and it's a major effort, and Alex's operation deserves a lot of credit for taking this initiative of all of the possible ranges of definitions and trying to bring them all together so that everybody can be on the same page. And so here is a pilot, and what we talked about is, let's try it. Let's take ADRRN as the pilot, and let's take 3 of those 129 terms and see what happens. Do a discussion on them, come up if we can come up with a common understanding, a shared understanding of 3 of the concepts. And we're going to try it out, see how it works. So this is very much an experiment. It hasn't been done, but it's where we want to go with this. Where I think everybody, and particularly Manu and Meghna and ADRRN, could take the lead. And so this is what we thought to do, to actually have a project which has been approved, which to achieve a successful transition for the further development and application of the encyclopedia under a consortium approach, so that you're going to drive this, not Alex's office. Alex's office is going to maintain support, but it's going to be driven by the owners of the terms, so to speak. So we're going to have 3 outputs. It's going to come up with a shared understanding on these 3 concepts, and based on that, we're going to determine the viability and value of continual engagement. In other words, is this something that everybody thinks is boring and is not interesting, and they can do their work just fine without it? Or is this something that you realize after going through the exercise, it is very important, and it's something that should be scaled up, not just to other humanitarian organizations, but to organizations that are working in the humanitarian sector, the government organizations, the national defense organizations, the first responders, everybody who's involved in humanitarian work, not just humanitarian organizations, not just the nonprofits and the funders and everybody else. So the idea here is to develop a model to can finalize the rest of the concepts and scaling it up worldwide. That's the goal, and we're going to try to do it in 6 months. Good luck. We work this out, and let's see how it's. Next slide, Magda. Yeah. Okay. So this is our 6 months. So the first output is the important one. The key is to get a shared understanding on 3 concepts. So this is the pilot stage. It's the one that you're going to do first. And after I present this, Newport's I'm going to hand it off to Newport, who's going to moderate the discussion, the consultations here. So first we identify the 3 concepts, and this was done last June. Magna and Manu consulted some key actors in the ADRRN, and I think we had 5 different people that came up with the top 3 concepts that could be of interest to this community, and those are the ones that we talked about. Localization was a big one. I think of all of the terms that had the biggest reference, and it's also, if you go back to the Humanitarian Encyclopedia, it's a term that hasn't been finalized. It's a work in progress. The second one was impact, because that's another term that's very fuzzy, and that one in the Humanitarian Encyclopedia has been, according to them, completed. And so let's see what we can do with a completed concept and adapt it to this environment. So take it from the researchers and the organizations that started it and see how it relates. We can take the model that we use for localization and apply it to the next concept, which is impact. And then the third one is inclusion, which is also mentioned by a lot of people. And there is one that has done that very little work in the encyclopedia has been done. So this is going to be pretty much open ground to see where this goes. So the 3 concepts, the original idea was to have 3 working groups, but I think after we sent out the request, we had 26 names come back. And I think each one decided which one they wanted to be in. They want to be localization, inclusion, or impact. And these are the ones that you have participated in. But what we're going to do, we change it a little bit. We're going to make one working group, and we're going to take each concept one at a time by the working group. And the ones that were not interested in localization, they don't have to participate, but they can see what's going on. The ones that we're working on impact, same thing. You can take it over, or you can participate. So we're just going to make one working group, and we're going to do it all, hopefully, in about 5 weeks here, August and September, overall, to cover 3 of these concepts. When we're done, we'll have this will be online. There's a Google Groups that you're all familiar with using, and we're going to set up a separate Google group for this and see, because you're already familiar with using the Google Groups. We're going to stay with that technology so that it's easy for you to respond and to interact. And that's being set up. And at the end, there's going to be another Zoom call. We'll bring everybody together after you've done your deliberation online, and have a final kind of session with the Zoom to see if what this is. It's a convergence session, it's called. Once you have it, take it out to the wider group. So you have your concepts, and then we're going to bring in other actors in the humanitarian space, researchers, academics, and humanitarians from other regions, and perhaps other organizations, like I said, maybe some government disaster management organizations and so on, and see what they think about these new concepts and see if they like it. So that's the consultation. Again, any inputs they have will be finalized, summarized, and reflected in the results, which then goes to the Regional Partnerships Week in December. And they'll have a session there. It'll be another convergence session where everybody participating will get a sense as to what's been going on and where they've come. So that's the first, the most important, and where all the work is going to happen. The second one is, once we have all these, you can see there, we'll see, okay, is this a viable, valuable exercise? We're going to do a poll of the participants to see what they think. If they want to keep going, as is specified in the in Alex's paper, should we have a community that keeps this going, that keeps these terms going, that keeps discussing them and talking about them and using them? And if there is, then we would put a proposal together for both the community and this consortium governance model, how the consortium is going to work. That gets circulated and finalized, and that's the viability determined, and we have a proposal. Finally, the third is the actual model. Document the experience as a process model, circulate, and prepare a project completion report. So we're going to have not only what we should do, but how do we do the model itself, the process, to take each term and to use what we learned and solidify it as a process, to kind of freeze it as steps to go through when you want to how you want to organize and how you want to discuss and communicate in the work plan. So that's the big picture. And I think, as I said, it's a major undertaking. It's going to be important for humanitarian work globally if this can be done. It's going to make these terms much more relevant and useful to the people that are using them, because they will have developed them and interpreted them themselves. And the value the investment that has been made by the Humanitarian Encyclopedia and the organization that Alex works from, University of Geneva and the Graduate Institute in Geneva, make that much more valuable. So I think it's a big effort, and hopefully you can come in and you can get your other partners to come in, get the people that weren't here to participate as well. Because the more people that we have on this original idea, the better the results are going to be. I like to make sure that we get as many perspectives as we can around this issue. And we'll be talking about your experiences here. So let me hand this off to Nupur to talk about what's the next steps are. That we are here. Nupur?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, can you all hear me? I hope you can. Yeah. So a very good evening. I'm Nupur, and I'm part of this organization Peer Connect, and I'm from India. And my role is here to be your facilitator for the next 5 weeks. I am going to facilitate your conversations around the 3 concepts that have been selected. So I'll take 5 minutes to take you through the process that we are going to go through in the next 5 weeks. So we are here right now. 3 concepts have been selected. Steve has already shared with you the process of selection: localization, impact, and inclusion. We've already formed a working group, and here we are at the Inception workshop. We have shared with you the program objectives, and the working group to anchor this whole process has been formed. Next slide, Meghna. So the next step is the working group discussions. So for that, we have formed the Google group. We have already formed one, and we will be adding all of you to that Google group by tomorrow. As Steve shared, that we felt this was the most already used forum that is comfortable to everybody. So we have selected a Google group, and I hope everybody is familiar and comfortable with this. Otherwise, please do get in touch. So we will be adding everybody on this Google group by tomorrow, and we will convene discussions for the 3 concepts on that group. I will be the facilitator, so I will keep getting in touch with you on and off through this process. We'll start with the first topic tomorrow, that is localization. We will put on some guiding questions for you. We'll share the concept. We'll carry the discussion for a few days. And once we feel we have covered it enough, then we will move to the other two, impact and inclusion, for the next few weeks. So please, I will be getting in touch with all of you or most of you one-on-one. So I hope you'll be okay with that. I really appreciate your cooperation there. I'll take your emails from Meghna. And once these discussions are over, then working group reaches to a consensus on the concept. So that's how the online discussion will shape up. Thanks. Next slide, Meghna. Yeah. So what will happen during these discussions? So the first step is to know what is your understanding of the concept and how have you used it. So here, please do share your stories of others that you know of from the ground and your experiences reflecting local settings and culture. And once we go through this step, the second will be to compare how this group thinks, how different it is from what is there in the Humanitarian Encyclopedia, or how similar it is. So we will do an exercise of comparing, and Steve and I will actively play a role here. The third step will be based on our knowing and our comparing to frame the final recommended concept. So we'll suggest an amended version of the concept, and we will again play an active role here to draft what you share your stories, and we'll put them together in a format which is acceptable. And by the end of this 3-4 week exercise, we will be able to arrive at a consensus of what a particular concept should look like according to our understanding and applicability. So that's about it. And the introduction email that you will receive tomorrow from us will contain all other details, and my email also. Please feel free to reach out to me for anything over the next 5 weeks. Please refer other people who you think we could contact to get stories from the field, because every story that comes in really solidifies this concept and brings out the real value of all the work that Alex and his team have been putting in for the last few years. So I'll stop here and hand it back to Meghna. We have a small interesting activity of doing a member profile that we will bring it back on the group when we start our conversations. But so yeah, Meghna, back to you for either question answers or the exercise first. Thank you very much.
Question answers.
Yeah. So thank you, Nupur. Yes, Steve, you were saying something?
We have a lot of material here. Let's see if anybody has any comments. Go ahead, Meghna.
Yeah. Any questions so far for anyone to have a clarification on how we're going to go about it?
I think it's getting more clearer now. At the beginning, we were confused, but I think it's pretty straightforward. It looks.
Yeah, thank you, Ramesh.
I would just like to know about shortly about the format of that encyclopedia. Would that be like the other encyclopedia existing, or there will be any sort of different thing in that encyclopedia?
Steve, would you like to take that?
Let Alex take that. It's about the format of the.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Well, so what I presented is what already is there in what we've been able to do over the research process and convert that into an online website, so you can access the website. And I think more what Steve presented with and Nupur with this process is to generate for some of the concepts a new version of what it means, but coming from the right direction, coming from the local understanding and interpretation of it, and framing that as a coherent shared entry or definition of what the concept means. And I think there's a lot of space in this discussion process to also work out what's the best way to present that at the end. So it may be that it's one line of text, localization means ABC, and because that's what the group decided, but it may be that you come up with other ways to present that. So I don't think it's a closed question, or I think we can have a look over the process what this sort of new version of the concept looks like. And then it can be presented in many formats, so it can be included on the current website. Obviously, that would be a logical place. But we may want to disseminate that in other ways that make more sense for you guys, if that's on social media or different sort of modalities. I think we have to listen to what's the way to share information in the region.
Thank you.
If I could just add, it might be good to show people the website, to have a look at it. And so the Humanitarian Encyclopedia .org, that would be the place to go to get familiar with what Alex had. It's very rich. There's a lot of things on it, but you get a sense as to what is there. Might be worth doing, and having a look at how it works.
Okay, thank you. Nice.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Hina.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Manu. And thanks to ADRRN for helping us be a part of this very interesting, very exciting concept. So it was quite heartening. And, I represent Christian Aid. I'm looking at humanitarian operations in India, having been a part of a coalition working with civil society, humanitarian practitioners, researchers, academicians, government, and a wide array of locally empowered networks, almost 850 of them in India. I think I could bring a lot of value in terms of, enabling, your facilitation and your becoming a bridge with many practitioners, and of course, giving my insights also on this. So Christian Aid primarily works on diversity, gender, and inclusion aspects, and that's why I've chosen inclusion. It was quite heartening to see that, this concept, this dynamic interactive online forum has been established in 2017. And, COVID exposed many of the humanitarian practitioners to, the fundamental frailties and, to adopt a common language and a common understanding of different concepts. And we were grappling with this. And I hope that this ambitious agenda that this, the group has set out, we will be able to achieve. What I wanted to understand is that because we have so many humanitarian principles, standards, global standards, from my understanding, I thought that this would at the end become a global guideline, which would, which many humanitarian agencies would go to, because you're also talking about guidance note, indicators, and developing scientific indicators for all these categories of pieces of work that we are, embarking on under this concept. Just wanted to understand whether that is the thing. So I'm coming from core humanitarian standards, some other global minimum standards, bare minimum standards that worldwide we are adopting in emergencies and humanitarian, situations. So whether that could also be an offshoot of this. So yeah, over to you. Thank
you. Alex, you want to take that one, or?
Yeah, I think I can take elements of that. It's a great question, and thanks also for sort of sharing how you see your role in the process and the expertise you can bring on the concepts like inclusion. So that's very, very encouraging. Yeah, I think just to the latter half of your question about, I think there's different types of concepts. Already we sort of know that some of the concepts on the list are norms and principles, and as you said, that according to one view, there's maybe a very common view, there's only 4 core humanitarian principles, but actually there's an increasingly long list that defines the sort of key norms of humanitarian action. So that kind of list, might be reflected. I don't think the goal is to define that whole list of principles here, but to unpack 1 or 2 of them well, 3 of them specifically. So to really unpack in detail what a few of the concepts mean, rather than to map what are all the concepts or all the standards or all the principles that are relevant, because that's sort of what we already did. And yeah, so but then the other thing is, I think there's this type of norms and standards and principles, but then there's also more technical terms that really do need, like concrete definitions, indicators, and ways to measure, because performance is benchmarked against them. But what's important as well is that maybe there's not one global standard, but that there is, standards adapted to context, and that those come from the bottom up. And so in those types of concepts, it's probably more concrete, but it's also important that it's contextually specific. So yeah, there's definitely differences in the types of concepts. And then that means there's differences in the ways we would find interesting to approach it, I think.
Let me add, because this is what's so fascinating about this exercise. It's not just one more encyclopedia, one more document with different terms. The work they have done was to canvass the entire field and to make it, if it could be, the go-to place to find the knowledge on it. They've done an exhaustive documentation tracking. The lexicon is, they've taken all the organizations, the publications from all the organizations, and they've taken their keywords and their definitions, and they blended them into what you have here. They also have all the research. Each of the terms, if you look, there's a whole series of papers and resources, documents that have been published on the term. So it's basically a one site to a go-to site that covers and takes what exists from all the organizations that have these definitions and publications, and takes them further. So it's not one more, it's the consolidation and the using the best practices, so to speak, and to incorporate all the learnings from all of the organizations into a one space to add. And the key here is we're adding the dimension, which hasn't been done enough, of the localized interpretations, how these work on the ground. So you have the theory, you have the publications, you have the international organizations who publish so much on this. They're all there. You can find them there. You can search them. You can use them to interpret, to help interpret. But the added dimension here is now the people that count, the ones in the field, the people like you that are working, the actual humanitarian organizations on the ground. So you're taking what exists and you're adding another dimension to it and making it the go-to space for the world. And this is the idea. I mean, this is kind of why I believe this is so important, because you're going to end up defining, making it the go-to space for all organizations, humanitarian organizations, if they want to introduce measurements and performance and impact and comparisons and understandings for their training and everything else. This is where they will go, hopefully.
No, only to say thank you to Alex, to Steve, Nupur for joining, and to all of you for being here. I can promise you this is going to be a very interesting journey. From this point onwards, there will be a Google group, which will, where all of you are going to be part of it. It will be separate from the ADRRN group, so that this remains like a very tight and closed group. And at some point, we will bring in more consultations, like Steve mentioned, just to enrich our discussion, enrich our learning on these concepts. So enjoy this journey, and please make full use of this opportunity as well to co-produce, to enrich, and to add to this very, very important area of work. The whole 3 concepts of localization, impact, and inclusion. All 3 are very important, and all 3 need that nuances that you all carry with you when you come back from the field into your offices. So thank you once again, and we will all be in touch. And yeah, hopefully a very rich discussion from this point onwards.